I always told my boyfriend how much I loved him. But when that terminal illness appeared 4 years ago, I had to leave him to be able to live my life. 3 months ago, I found out through a post from his mom that, miraculously, he had been cured and that now he was in love with his nurse. That is not fair. I am supposed to be the love of his life. They should have notified me that he was fine so I could return. When I first met Simon, my boyfriend of 10 years, I knew our connection was written in the stars, a rare alignment of souls that most people are too shallow to ever experience. We were the couple everyone envied, the golden pair who shared a refined, aesthetic life filled with art, travel, and a shared understanding of the finer things. Our bond wasn't just a relationship, it was a sanctuary of beauty that I curated with the utmost devotion. For a decade, I was his muse and his rock, the woman who understood the sanctity of our shared image. We didn't just live, we existed in a state of grace that I felt responsible for maintaining against the mundanity of the world. Every anniversary, every shared look, was a testament to the high standards I held for our love. Everything changed 4 years ago when the doctors handed us a sentence they called incurable, a word that sounded so ugly it didn't belong in our world. Seeing Simon in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the stench of antiseptic and the beep of monitors, felt like a personal insult to the legacy we had built. He began to look different, his vibrant energy replaced by a hollow grayness that threatened to swallow me whole if I stayed. I realized then that I had a higher calling, a duty to protect the memory of what we were from the rot of what he was becoming. I couldn't let him spend his final months watching me wither away in grief, losing the very essence of the woman he adored. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I chose to leave, a move of pure, agonizing selflessness designed to keep our love untainted. I remember the day I packed my bags, my heart breaking not for myself, but for the tragedy of a love too beautiful to endure a slow, messy death. I didn't just walk away, I went into a self-imposed exile, carrying the heavy burden of our past like a sacred relic. People who haven't experienced a connection this profound will never understand the bravery it takes to walk away from a dying man to preserve his dignity. I decided that Simon deserved to remember me as his queen, not as a weeping shadow at his bedside. By removing myself, I allowed him to have a clean ending, free from the guilt of seeing my life stall because of his misfortune. It was a gift of freedom, a spiritual release that I offered up at the altar of our 10-year history. To mark this sacred vow of loyalty, I bought a delicate silver necklace with his initial S, which has never left my neck for a single second. This necklace became my daily penance, a cold piece of metal that reminded me of the man I was mourning while he was still technically drawing breath. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a widow in spirit, a woman who had sacrificed her present happiness to keep a memory pure. I lived a quiet, somber life, refusing to move on in any meaningful way because I was still tethered to our spiritual contract. I felt like a guardian of a flame that only I was holy enough to keep burning. My friends called it an obsession, but I knew it was the highest form of devotion, a loyalty that transcended physical presence. I truly believed Simon had passed away years ago, or was at least in a state where my absence was a mercy. Then, 3 months ago, while I was scrolling through Facebook during a moment of quiet reflection, I saw a post from his mother, Diane. There was a photo of Simon, not the skeletal version I had escaped, but a man who looked vibrant, healthy, and infuriatingly alive. He was standing in a garden, smiling with a glow that I should have been the one to inspire. My heart stopped, not with joy, but with a sense of profound spiritual violation. The caption mentioned his miraculous remission, and thanked the doctors for a second chance I wasn't told he had. The post didn't stop there, it went on to introduce a woman named Ellen, described as the nurse who has saved his soul. Seeing Simon's arm wrapped around this stranger felt like a knife through the very contract I had spent 4 years honoring. Ellen is just a hired hand, someone who was paid to be there during the messy parts one was protecting him from. She didn't earn his heart through history or shared values, she simply occupied the space I left vacant to protect our legacy. It is a total betrayal of everything we stood for, an opportunistic move by a woman who doesn't understand the depth of our bond. They knew exactly where I was, and they chose to leave me in the dark, mourning a man who was busy getting better without me. I spent those 4 years in a state of emotional suspension, waiting for a signal that never came. As the love of his life, I should have been the first person notified the moment the incurable became curable. It was their moral obligation to reach out and tell me it was safe to return to my rightful place. Instead, they allowed me to suffer in my exile while Ellen played house in a life she didn't build. It's as if they think my sacrifice was a choice of convenience rather than a calculated act of mercy. They have treated my absence as a desertion when it was actually the ultimate manifestation of my love. The fact that Simon is building a life with this nurse is a mockery of the decade we spent together. He is clearly in a state of misplaced gratitude, confusing medical care with the kind of soul-deep connection only we share. Ellen is a clinical rebound, a temporary bandage on a wound that only I have the right to heal. I can see in the photos that he looks lost, his smile lacking the sophisticated edge it had when he was with me. He's settled for someone who sees him as a patient, not as the masterpiece I helped him become. It's a tragic waste of a miracle, and I feel a duty to step in and correct this narrative before it goes any further. I find it incredibly cruel that Diane, a woman I once respected, would post such a thing without even a courtesy call to the woman who was her son's everything. She watched me suffer, she knew I was wearing his initial around my neck, yet she kept his recovery a secret. It feels like a conspiracy to erase me from the history books of his life. They want to paint Ellen as the hero and me as the ghost, but ghosts have a way of returning when justice is denied. I am not going to let a paid employee steal the reward for a life I spent 10 years cultivating. I am ready to resume my role, and it is time they realize that my exile is over. Now, I am left holding this silver necklace, feeling the weight of a betrayal that defies logic. I was the one who bore the spiritual cost of his illness, while Ellen just did her job for a paycheck. Simon's silence is the most painful part, a sign that his illness must have affected his judgment more than the doctors realized. He needs to be reminded of who he is and who we are together, away from the clinical influence of a nurse. I am his true north, the woman who loved him enough to let him go when things were ugly. Now that things are beautiful again, it is only fair that I am the one there to enjoy them. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, if you actually loved him, you would have been there holding his hand through the ugly parts, not running away to preserve a memory while he was literally dying. OP's reply, you clearly don't understand the burden of a high-level aesthetic connection. I protected him from the trauma of my pain. It was the ultimate act of selflessness that a common mind can't grasp. Anonymous user 2 says, it's been 4 years, lady. You left him for dead and didn't check in once. You can't just pop back in because he's healthy now. OP's reply, time is irrelevant to a soulmate connection. He was supposed to wait for the miracle and then send for me. Our bond is a sacred contract that doesn't just expire because of a calendar. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and I've spent every moment reflecting on the lack of integrity shown by Simon's family. After realizing that my silence was being weaponized against me, I decided to take the high road and reach out to his mother, Diane. I sent her a long, carefully worded message explaining that I had seen the post and that I forgave her for the oversight in not contacting me sooner. I made it clear that I was ready to overlook the past 4 years of silence and help Simon transition back to a real life, away from the clinical, sterile environment Ellen represents. I even offered to host a small, private dinner for just the 3 of us so we could realign our spirits and discuss the future. It was a gesture of immense grace, proving that I am the bigger person in this unfortunate situation. I waited for hours, staring at my phone, expecting a tearful apology or at least a sign of relief that I was back to fix things. Instead, after a grueling half-day of silence, Diane simply sent back, please don't contact us. That was it. 4 years of my mourning and a decade of our history dismissed in 4 cold words. It's clear to me now that Ellen has already begun her work, poisoning their minds and twisting the narrative of my departure into something it wasn't. She has likely convinced them that I abandoned him, when in reality, I was the one who suffered most in my solitary devotion. It is a classic move by someone who knows they are an interloper. She has to isolate him from his true history to keep her fragile hold on him. I'm not even angry at Diane, I'm just disappointed in her lack of moral backbone. She's clearly being manipulated by a woman who saw a vulnerable, wealthy man in recovery and decided to stake her claim. Ellen has used her position of power as a nurse to insert herself into a vacancy that was never actually empty. It's a predatory tactic, taking advantage of Simon's weakened state to make herself appear indispensable. My mother always said that people in pain will cling to the first hand offered, regardless of whose hand it is. Simon is clearly trapped in a gratitude trap, feeling like he owes Ellen his heart simply because she did the job she was trained to do. Despite this rejection, I haven't taken off the silver yes necklace. If anything, it feels heavier now, like a cross I'm carrying for both of us. It is a symbol of my enduring holiness in a situation where everyone else has lost their way. I am the only one maintaining the sanctity of our original bond, while Simon plays at being a new person with a woman who doesn't know his favorite vintage or his childhood dreams. It's a tragic farce, and I feel a profound sense of duty to rescue him from this delusion. He is living a life that is a lie, a clinical fantasy constructed in a hospital ward. I am the only one who can bring him back to the reality of the golden life we once shared. The silence from their end is just a symptom of the guilt they feel for replacing a queen with a commoner. They can't face me because my presence is a reminder of the high standards they have failed to meet. If they truly believed Ellen was the one, they would have the courage to speak to me and explain themselves. Instead, they hide behind short, dismissive texts like cowards who know they've stolen something that doesn't belong to them. I am not going to let 4 words from a confused mother dictate the end of a 10-year soulmate connection. I have a responsibility to Simon to fight for the truth of our love, even if he's too drugged by ingratitude to see it right now. I spent the evening looking through our old photos, the ones where we looked like we belonged on the cover of a magazine. In those images, the light in his eyes is meant for me, a spark that no nurse could ever replicate with mere medication and bedside manner. I can see the difference between the staged, messy garden photos Diane posted and the curated perfection of our past. He looks healthy now, sure, but he lacks the soul that I nurtured for a decade. Ellen is a technician, I am the architect of his identity. It is offensive to suggest that a few years of caretaking can outweigh a lifetime of spiritual curation. The more I think about it, the more I realize that Simon is a victim of his own recovery. He has been conditioned to believe that the person who saw him at his lowest is the person who should see him at his highest. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of the human spirit. We don't marry our doctors for a reason. Real love is about the heights we reach together, not the depths he sank to alone. By being there for the ugly parts, Ellen has actually tainted his perception of what a partner should be. I kept myself pure and distant so that when he returned to the world of the living, I would be the untainted prize waiting for him. It's almost laughable how they think a simple, "don't contact us," will suffice. They are dealing with a woman who has spent 4 years in the trenches of silent mourning. I have developed a resilience and a moral clarity that they cannot begin to comprehend. I know what is right, and what is right is for Simon to be with the woman who understood his potential, not the woman who managed his symptoms. I am going to find a way to reach him, to bypass the gatekeepers who are holding him hostage in this mediocre new life. He deserves to know the truth about why I left and the sacred sacrifice I made. I feel a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes with knowing you are on the side of divine justice. Ellen can have her little moment in the sun, her hero narrative, but it won't last because it isn't built on a foundation of truth. She is a rebound of convenience, a placeholder for the real thing. I am the real thing, and I am not going anywhere. The necklace reminds me every second that I am a woman of my word. I made a vow to his memory, and now that the memory has become a man again, the vow remains. I will not let his recovery be the thing that destroys our legacy. If anything, his health is a sign that the universe has finally aligned to bring us back together. The miracle wasn't just for him, it was for us, a test of my patience and a reward for my loyalty. I have passed the test, and now I am coming to claim the prize. They can try to lock the doors, but they can't lock out a soulmate. I am ready to do whatever it takes to restore the natural order of things. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You literally said you left him to be able to live your life. That's not a sacrifice, that's a vacation from responsibility. He probably loves the nurse because she actually cares about him." OP's reply, "She's a rebound of convenience. He's confused because she was the first person he saw when he woke up. You can't compare care with the deep spiritual architecture I provided for 10 years. Anonymous user 2 says, "His mom's response was cold because you're acting like a stalker. Leave them alone, they've been through enough without you coming back to haunt them." OP's reply, "She's clearly being manipulated by Ellen. I need to save Simon from this gratitude trap before he wastes his second chance on someone so basic." Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and the weight of injustice finally became too much to bear in silence. I realized that as long as I remained a voice on a screen or a text on a phone, the gatekeepers could continue to filter the truth. I couldn't sit by and watch my life, a life I spent a decade building, be stolen by a woman in scrubs who probably thinks a loyalty is just checking a vitals monitor. I decided that a face-to-face meeting was the only way to break the spell Ellen has cast over my Simon. I drove to his new apartment, a place I had to find through a bit of digital sleuthing, because transparency is apparently too much to ask from family. When I arrived, I made sure I looked exactly like the woman he remembered: elegant, composed, and undeniably superior to the clinical world he's been trapped in. When Ellen opened the door, I maintained my composure and was very polite, as a woman of my standing should be. I didn't scream or make a scene, I simply looked her in the eye and told her, "I'm here to take over now, thank you for your service." I even went as far as to offer to reimburse her for any extra emotional labor she felt she provided during his recovery, as if she were a high-end consultant who had finished a project. It was a fair and generous offer, acknowledging her role as a temporary caretaker while asserting my permanent status. I expected her to be relieved that the real partner had finally arrived to take the burden off her hands. Instead, she looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pity that was frankly insulting, and she actually tried to close the door on me. Before she could shut me out, Simon came into the hallway, and for a fleeting second, I saw the spark of recognition I had been dreaming of for 4 years. He looked remarkably healthy, his skin clear and his eyes bright, which sent a pang of hurt through my chest because I should have been the one to inspire that transformation. I shouldn't have been cheated out of the joy of his recovery just because I chose the more difficult path of exile. I stepped into the doorway, ignoring Ellen's protests, and told him directly that I was back and that we could forget these past 4 years ever happened. I spoke with the confidence of a woman who knows her place in the universe, offering him a total reset, a return to the golden era of our love. To my absolute shock, Simon didn't even hug me, he didn't even reach out to touch the silver yes necklace I was wearing so prominently for him. He just stood there, looking at me as if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house, his expression guarded and cold. Then, he turned his head toward Ellen, that woman who was hovering like a vulture, and asked, "Is this the girl from the photos?" The way he said the girl was like he was referring to a minor character in a movie he saw once and barely remembered. It was a devastating blow to my dignity, a sign of how deeply Ellen has scrubbed his memory of the depth we shared. He wasn't seeing his soulmate, he was seeing a photo that Ellen had likely used to mock me. I tried to explain to him that the photos were just a shadow of what we had, and that the necklace around my neck was proof of my unwavering fidelity. I told him that I had mourned him every single day, keeping our legacy pure while he was in the dark. I explained that leaving was an act of a sacred sacrifice, a way to ensure that our love never had to face the indignity of a hospital bed. He just listened with this terrifyingly calm look on his face, a look that lacked the passion and fire we used to share. It was as if he had been lobotomized by the comfort Ellen provided, traded his soul for the safety of a nurse's care. Ellen had the audacity to step between us, telling me that I needed to leave or she would call the police. The police. As if I were a common trespasser and not the woman who had shared Simon's bed for a decade. I looked at Simon, waiting for him to defend me, to tell her that I was the one who truly mattered, but he just placed a hand on her shoulder. That simple gesture felt like a physical assault on our history, a public declaration that he preferred a paid employee over his spiritual equal. I realized then that he was in a state of deep shock, unable to process the return of his true queen because he had been conditioned to settle for less. I didn't lose my temper, I simply told them that I would give them space to realize the gravity of their mistake. I walked back to my car with my head held high, though my hands were shaking with the sheer absurdity of the situation. It's clear that Simon is currently living in a post-traumatic haze where a presence is being confused with a loyalty. He thinks Ellen is a hero because she was there for the unpleasant details, failing to see that she was just doing her job. He's blinded by the immediate relief of being alive, and he's projecting that relief onto the person who happened to be standing there with a thermometer. The necklace feels like it's burning my skin now, but I refuse to take it off. It is the only thing in this world that is still honest. Simon's behavior is just a temporary glitch, a symptom of a man who has forgotten his own worth. He has been reduced to a version of himself that is satisfied with mediocrity, and I am the only one who can remind him of the heights he is capable of reaching. I will not let a nurse with a savior complex dictate the rest of his life. I am his true partner, and I will be here when the ingratitude wears off and he realizes he's married to a stranger. I've decided that I need to be more strategic in how I approach this. Simon is clearly being guarded by Ellen and his mother, a wall of mediocrity that is keeping him from the truth. I need to remind him of the beauty we had, the art, the travel, the conversations that Ellen couldn't possibly participate in. She probably talks to him about heart rates and medication schedules, while I talk to him about the soul. The contrast will eventually become unbearable for him, and he will come crawling back to the only woman who truly understands him. I am not the girl from the photos. I am the woman who defined his existence for 10 years. It is an insult to the universe to suggest otherwise. I will give him a few days to sit with the shock of seeing me, to let the image of my grace haunt his perfect new life. He will realize that Ellen is just a temporary bandage, and I am the cure he's been looking for all along. I am the holy judge of our love, and I have already passed my verdict. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, offering to reimburse his girlfriend for her emotional labor? You are absolutely delusional. She's his partner, not a contractor you can fire. OP's reply, you don't understand the depth of a 10-year bond. Ellen is just a temporary bandage. I was offering her a graceful exit from a role she was never meant to hold permanently. Anonymous user 2 says, he literally asked, is this the girl from the photos? He's moved on, honey. He doesn't even see you as a person anymore, just a memory he's glad is over. OP's reply, he's clearly in shock. I need to give him space to realize his mistake. Seeing me was a confrontation with the high-level life he's currently too weak to handle. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the level of disrespect I have faced has reached a truly cosmic scale. Instead of the phone call or the tearful apology I rightfully deserved after our encounter, Simon sent me a long, clinical email that read more like a legal deposition than a message to a soulmate. In it, he didn't thank me for my sacrifice or acknowledge the decade of my life I gave to him. Instead, he had the nerve to list every single time Ellen stayed up with him during his darkest hours, as if being awake at 3 a.m. is a substitute for a spiritual connection. He detailed how she stayed by his side even when his insurance ran out and things were at their most dire, as if financial and logistical management are the hallmarks of great romance. The most offensive part of the email was when he wrote that loyalty isn't a necklace, it's a presence. It was a direct, cruel attack on the silver S I have worn as a holy symbol of my devotion. He is so morally corrupted by his illness that he has begun to value mere being there over the poetic, high-level loyalty I practiced in my exile. He thinks that because someone helped him use a bedpan, they deserve the keys to his heart. It's a vulgar, basic way of looking at love, and it proves that he has lost the sophisticated perspective that once made him worthy of me. He has traded the sublime for the functional, and he expects me to applaud him for it. I realized then that Simon is no longer the man I loved. He is a shell inhabited by a person who has been broken by the medical system. He's become a puppet for Ellen's hero narrative, repeating the lines she has clearly fed him about what real support looks like. I decided that if he wouldn't listen to reason, I would have to bring the truth to our wider social circle. I started a group chat with our old friends, the people who saw us at our peak, to explain that I am the victim in this tragic story. I told them about the sacred sacrifice I made by leaving, how I mourned a living man for 4 years, only to be replaced by a hired hand the moment he got better. I expected a wave of support, a collective outcry against the injustice of a nurse stealing a wife's place. Instead, some of our friends have actually had the audacity to take his side, asking why I didn't just check in if I cared so much. They are showing how little they value true, poetic love over the mundane act of physical presence. They are falling for the same ingratitude trap that Simon is in, prioritizing the person who did the work over the person who bore the spiritual burden. It is sickening to see how quickly people will abandon high principles for the sake of a feel-good recovery story. I spent hours explaining to them that Ellen was paid to be there, while I was paying the price in my soul for free. My suffering was silent, elegant, and private, the kind of pain that has real weight in the eyes of the universe. Ellen's sacrifice was just a job description, and the fact that she's now reaping the benefits of my groundwork is a moral abomination. One of our old friends, Mark, even had the nerve to say that I chose comfort over commitment. I blocked him immediately. I don't have room in my life for people who can't distinguish between a tactical retreat for the sake of beauty and a lack of care. The necklace around my neck has become a symbol of my isolation, a heavy reminder that I am the only one left with any sense of sanctity. Simon's email was a betrayal of our shared history, a rewrite of our 10 years to make Ellen look like the protagonist. He's trying to erase the fact that I was the one who molded him, who shared his dreams when they were still grand. Now he's content with a woman who probably dreams of retirement plans and health insurance. It's a tragic decline, and it hurts to see a masterpiece being used as a doormat by someone so ordinary. I've started to realize that the world is filled with people who prefer the easy part, the recovery, the health, the smiles, and can't handle the complex, aesthetic requirements of a truly great love. Ellen didn't have to do the hard part. She didn't have to walk away and mourn. She just had to show up and do her job. The fact that Simon can't see the difference is a testament to how much his remission has cost him in terms of character. He has become a shallow version of himself, a man who values a nurse's touch over a soulmate's sacrifice. I find myself walking through the city, feeling like a martyr in a world of pagans. Every time I touch the silver initial, I am reminded that my loyalty is of a higher order than anything Simon or Ellen can imagine. They are living a life of convenience. I am living a life of conviction. I have decided to organize a welcome back party for Simon, whether he wants it or not. I need to get him away from Ellen's influence and surround him with the people and things that remind him of who he truly is. He needs a shock to his system to break the nurse's spell. I am the only one who can save him from this mediocrity. If the friends I invited don't see the truth yet, they will when they see us together again. They will see the difference between the woman who was his everything and the woman who was just his nurse. I am confident that once he is back in our old world, the clinical fog will lift, and he will see Ellen for the temporary placeholder she is. I am the permanent fixture in his life, and it's time I reminded everyone of that fact. I am preparing my speech for the party, a speech about the sacrifice of the martyr. I want everyone to understand the weight of what I did, the agony of the 4 years I spent in the shadows. I want them to see the silver necklace as the holy relic it is. I am not going to let this nurse win by default. I am the rightful queen, and I am going to reclaim my throne, even if I have to drag Simon back to it myself. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, loyalty isn't a necklace, it's a presence. Simon hit the nail on the head. You're obsessed with a piece of jewelry while he was fighting for his life. OP's reply, the necklace represents the burden of my silence. Ellen got the easy part, the recovery. You're focusing on the physical while I'm honoring the spiritual architecture. Anonymous user 2 says, the fact that your friends are siding with him should tell you something. Ellen stayed when the money ran out, you left when the aesthetics got ruined. OP's reply, she was paid to be there. I was paying the price in my soul for free. My sacrifice was about preserving his dignity, something a paycheck can't buy. Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and everything I worked for, every sacrifice I made, has collapsed into a pile of ungrateful ash. I organized the welcome back party at our old favorite spot, a sophisticated lounge where we used to spend our most beautiful evenings. I invited everyone we knew, determined to create an environment so thick with our shared history that Simon would have no choice but to snap out of his clinical trance. I spent thousands on the arrangements, ensuring everything was curated to the high standards we once shared. I wore the silver ES necklace prominently, like a badge of honor, ready to finally receive the public acknowledgement of my 4-year martyrdom. When Simon arrived, he wasn't alone, of course. Ellen was there, looking painfully out of place in such a refined setting, her presence a smudge on the aesthetic perfection I had created. I didn't let her dampen my spirit. I waited for the right moment, then stood on a chair to command the room's attention. I held up my necklace, the silver shining under the spotlights, and gave a speech I had practiced for weeks. I spoke about the sacrifice of the martyr, about the holy pain of leaving someone you love to give them a clean, untainted memory of your bond. I told everyone how I had carried the burden of his memory in silence, waiting for the day I could finally return to my rightful place. I expected the room to erupt in applause, or at least for Simon to come forward with tears in his eyes, finally understanding the depth of my devotion. Instead, Simon stood up, but not to thank me. He looked around at our old friends, then looked me dead in the eye with a coldness that felt like ice water in my veins. He told the entire room that the day I walked out 4 years ago, he realized something fundamental about love. He said that if he ever lived, he would never let anyone back into his life who voted themselves off the island when it started sinking. The room went silent, the air thick with the weight of his ungrateful words. He didn't stop there. He had the audacity to say that Ellen didn't just nurse him, she gave him a reason to fight while I was busy, preserving memories of a man I had already given up on. He said that real love is the person who cleans the wounds, not the person who runs away to avoid seeing them. He looked at Ellen with a warmth that I used to think was reserved only for me, and he told our friends that she was the only reason he was standing there today. My friends, people I had known for a decade, didn't protest. They didn't stand up for the sanctity of our original bond. Instead, they stood up and walked out with him, leaving me alone in the center of the room I had decorated for him. I am sitting here now, a month later, in my quiet apartment, still wearing this silver initial around my neck. I realized that I am the only one who truly understands the sanctity of what we had, the only one holy enough to appreciate the beauty of my sacrifice. They are all too shallow, too mired in the mess of survival, to see the divine nature of my choice. I lost him not because I wasn't enough, but because I was too good for the unrefined, ugly reality he chose to embrace. He settled for a nurse because he couldn't handle the weight of a queen's devotion. The world wants to celebrate the survivor and the caretaker, but they forget the martyr who holds the memory together. Simon thinks he found a new life, but he's really just living in a smaller, simpler world where loyalty is measured by attendance rather than soul. He doesn't realize that by choosing Ellen, he has abandoned the high-level existence we cultivated. He's opted for a life of medicine and gratitude, a pedestrian existence that I was trying to save him from. It is a tragic waste of a second chance, but I can't force someone to be worthy of a masterpiece. I look at the silver S in the mirror and I don't see failure. I see a woman who remained true to a higher law. I didn't abandon him, I ascended to a place where our love could remain perfect. If he wants to live in the mud with the woman who cleaned him, that is his choice, but it doesn't change the fact that I am the one who truly loved the best of him. I am the guardian of the version of Simon that was worth knowing, the one before the illness stripped him of his sophistication. Ellen can have the survivor, I will keep the king. The coldness of the necklace is a comfort now, a reminder that my loyalty is untainted by the messy compromises of being there. I did the hard work of mourning, the spiritual labor that no one wants to acknowledge. I am the only person in this entire sordid story who stayed true to the ideal. They can call it what they want: delusion, abandonment, selfishness, but I know it was holiness. I am the only one who understands that some things are too beautiful to be allowed to break, even if it means walking away to keep them whole. I don't regret a single thing. Not the leaving, not the necklace, and certainly not the attempt to bring him back. I have proven my character, while Simon has proven his lack of it. He chose the easy path of gratitude, the path that requires no imagination and no aesthetic sense. He has become a man who values a nurse's presence over a soulmate's sacrifice, and for that, I truly pity him. He is living a second life that is inherently lesser than the first one I gave him. I will continue to wear this necklace, not as a reminder of him, but as a reminder of myself. I am the woman who loved a man enough to give him a perfect memory. If he wasn't strong enough to keep it, that is his loss, not mine. I am the holy judge of my own life, and I have found myself to be the only one with the courage to be truly loyal to the end. The party may be over, and the friends may be gone, but my integrity is intact. I am, and always will be, the love of his life, whether he is brave enough to admit it or not.